Watch Dylan Hand, he is on your left. Jackson Peterson is on your right. It's humans, it's mono green Tron, and there are some very important cards here for both players. On the Tron side of things, Oblivion Stone's a big one. Wormcoil Engine certainly matters, and Ugin the Spirit Dragon, which Jackson has 2 copies of, can be lights out all by itself.
This is the one matchup where I think you feel the absence of Thalia Heretic Cathar the most. It was a card that was prevalent in the early builds of humans. It's very disruptive towards Tron. Even if they assemble Tron, often they can't do something the turn in question. Humans has moved away from that card in exchange for some more efficient threats, but you feel the absence here.
1 mana artifacts is how we're going to get this day started here for Dylan Han. It's an Ether Vial. That's vialing in a champion of the parish right now. Cavernous Souls and Unclaimed Territory, of course, both naming humans. That'll be a Meddling Mage. You'll get a Meddling Mage. That's going to name something. You also get a counter on the champion of the parish to make it a 2/2 for Jackson Peterson. And there's this Tower into Expedition Map is where he's going to get things started. So if he has that second Tron piece, that means he'll have that third Tron piece, and he'll have access to 7 mana on turn 3. There's Nurse's Power Plant, which means he can search for Nurse's Mine. As for that Meddling Mage, it's naming Oblivion Stone. That's generally going to be the first name against Tron, where you hope that Ugin is the second one, and then you've kind of locked him out of their 2 best things.
Right, because if you're able to assemble a battlefield and lock out their sweepers, even something like Karn, Karn's going to kill a thing, but you can usually attack it down.
Second Meddling Mage is going to name Walking Ballista, and we have a champion of the parish counter. Let's give another one to the champion. And a Phantasmal Image copying Meddling Mage. That one's going to be naming something as well. We'll figure out what that is here in just a moment as Jackson Peterson will sacrifice his Expedition Map, and that third image is on Ugin. So we've got 1 on Ballista, 2 on Ugin, third one is naming Oblivion Stone. All the good cards are kind of cut out now.
Right. So if Dylan Han has something like Reflector Mage, he's I don't want to say has the check mark on this game, but if he's not at the mercy of Wormcoil Engine, he's locked out many of Peterson's best cards to answer this battlefield.
Peterson is going to search for Urza's Mine, of course.
However, if Peterson has Wormcoil Engine and Hand is without a Reflector Mage, Peterson's position's still pretty solid. He still has to work his way through these Meddling Mages eventually, but Hand's in a position where he can't effectively attack.
We'll go back over to Jackson Peterson right now, who can complete the Tron if he would like. Again, mono green Tron is the way that players have actually ended up moving towards. Used to see splashes for black, for, of course, Fatal Push and Collective Brutality. The red splash would grow over the Burn Willows for Pyroclasm and Ancient Grudge. But now we see players with a lot of basics because of that uptick in Field of Ruin. This will be a Chromatic Sphere. Draw a card, Will Peterson, so he'll have a colored mana floating.
I'm also just structurally not a huge fan of playing with cards like Fatal Push. It feels very disruptive towards assembling Tron on turn 3, and in the matchups that are fast, where you want a card like Fatal Push, I think your best path is just try to get Tron on turn 3 and play whatever. That's better than trying to play a Fatal Push or play a Pyroclasm.
You certainly have to make some concessions to your mana base as well, playing cards like Llanowar Waste and Blooming Marsh. Your goal is to obviously build towards Tron. Blooming Marsh is your 4th land. No bueno.
Yeah, I've had my experiences with Burn or some beatdown decks like Zoo. When my opponent goes turn 1 Grove of the Burn Willows, my reaction is they're dead.
It's all over.
If they don't have Tron on turn 3, they can't win.
Yep.
And even if they hit me with a Pyroclasm or they Fatal Push a play, that's not going to compensate for the fact that they're not threatening me with one of their big plays on the 3rd turn.
World Breaker is the reveal there off of Ancient Stirrings, and that's a large threat, no doubt about it there for Jackson Peterson, but not one that has a huge effect on the battlefield and not one that he can play this turn. This will be a Chromatic Star. Peterson will sacrifice that. He'll have a colored mana and a colorless mana floating at this point. And now we are going to see a Sylvan Scrying. Looks like it's going to be another copy of Urza's Tower. Now with access to 10 mana, he can play Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger, of which he has 2 copies in his main deck. That is, of course, if he gets another turn, and there is certainly no guarantee of that.
And even if he does get another turn, I think Ulamog's unlikely to stabilize this battlefield. He's going to take so much damage next turn if he can't interact with the board right now.
It'll be an attack for 10 at the minimum here for Dylan Han. You just see a Relic and a Star, and if Dylan Han just has a copy of Mantis Rider, or if he has a Thalia's Lieutenant, the game is over. You see Dylan's doing a little bit of counting there. 4 from the Champion of the Parish, 2 from each Meddling Mage. This is a Mantis Rider. We're all done. 3 plus the 1 from the trigger on the champion. That'll make it 14. And Dylan Hand is going to win this game here over Jackson Peterson as Humans is doing Humans things. It is up a game here very quickly over Mono Green Tron. We will see if Jackson Peterson's got some tools in his sideboard to tie things up in just a minute. We are back. Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan here, watching round number 10 of SCG Minneapolis at SCG Tour, hashtag SCGMINN, all weekend long to join the conversation as we watch Dylan Hand with Humans against Jackson Peterson, Mono Green Tron. We will start with Peterson as he will be on the play here, given his loss in game number 1. 3 Nature's Claim, 3 Thought-Knots here, 3 Thragtusk, 2 Warping Whale, 4 Singletons and Relic of Progenitus, Spatial Contortion, Surgical Extraction, and Torpor. Patrick, not a ton.
Not a ton. I think the Spatial Contortion and that's the top of the list here. Just a clean removal spell, something that can actually touch some of the hate bears like Meddling Mage. The creatures, I could take it or leave it. I mean, Humans has a way of overwhelming these kind of cards. Thought-Knot Seer and Thragtusk are just not that big on the battlefield comparatively, and they're vulnerable to flyers. But Peterson may just want to bring in more creatures and play a little bit of a more reactive game early on.
For Dylan Hand, he's looking at 3 Dire Fleet Daredevils, 3 Sin Collectors, 2 Reclamation Sage, 2 Gutshot, 2 Kataki War's Wage, 2 is a Static Caster, and a Dismember. I don't see a ton over here either.
Yeah, he has a couple modest options. I think you could talk me into potentially Kataki, Reclamation Sage, and maybe the Sin Collector. The issue here is normally when you go to the sideboard in these controlling matchups, your response as a human player is Reflector Mage is bad, remove 4 Reflector Mages and bring in 4 of whatever. Against Tron, Reflector Mage is not necessarily bad. Often they're trying to stabilize the game with one big blocker, and their sideboard, if they have something for the matchup, often involves other blockers. Not all of these are ideal targets to bounce, but sometimes all you need is that one last burst of tempo to finish the game out. So it'll be interesting to see what Hand does here. You could bail on the Reflector Mages and just try to work around Wormcoil Engine should it show up, or lock it out in other ways, or you could basically keep the same 60 that Hand has in Game 1 and acknowledge that Reflector Mage has enough targets to be above the line.
Yeah, and I've liked that in this matchup as Reflector Mage has just enough targets to be above the line because Wormcoil Engine can be problematic enough.
And a lot of the anti-artifact measures, they have spots of being good against Tron, but they're not consistently good.
One mana artifact shit again for hand. It's a Cavern of Souls into Ether Vial for Jackson Peterson. It's an Urza's Power Plant into Chromatic Star. He will sacrifice the star for a green mana, draw a card, and now take a look at 5 more via Ancient Stirrings. See if he can find another Tron piece. Looks like the last one was helpful there at Urza's Mine.
I love, this goes without saying, love the Antiquities Tron pieces.
Of course you do. Of course you do.
Takes me back to playing against the Hive in Mishra's Workshop in Eugene Harvey's living room.
We will go back over to Dylan, who will put a counter on his Vial. Up to 1 is the Vial. That is a Horizon Canopy. This is a Kitesail Freebooter. Here comes a trigger. Get a good look here at Jackson Peterson's hand. You'll find an Expedition Map, an Ancient Stirrings. Looks like a Wormcoil Engine along with another Power Plant and a Sylvan Scrying.
So unless Peterson draws it, he's not going to be able to Tron and do something next turn. But he does have a path to Tron.
A couple of different ways there. Now, of course, Freebooter cannot take Wormcoil Engine, so it can't take the payoff card. We could see him take Stirrings with a Kitesail Freebooter, as that is a very powerful one, of course. So a couple of options here for Dylan. In this game, he is certainly not off to the start that he was off to last game. And it looks like Stirrings will be the selection here for Dylan. And we'll head back over to Jackson Peterson, who will draw a card. Doesn't look like he peeled the Tower of Power. He will start by sacrificing Chromatic Star. A little bit of a redraw towards Tower there, but it doesn't look like he found it, so.
How do you feel about, I know you were very fond of this deck a couple of years ago. How do you feel watching it on camera?
Totally fine with it if they know the mechanics of the deck.
Sure.
Totally fine.
Well, you've expressed over the last, month or year, every time you watch a deck on camera and it's doing well, you're like, I want to play it.
I have legitimately zero interest in playing Tron.
Oh, okay, you're off it?
Literally none.
Okay.
Yeah. I want nothing to do with it. Did you know, by the way, my Tron days were quietly 6 years ago?
I thought it was more recent than that.
2012.
I knew that it was a couple of years ago.
2012.
Man. Recent enough, I guess.
Everyone's like, yeah, I used to play Tron. That was 6 years ago. 3 mana. Expedition Map, crack it right away. Time flies, man. Time flies.
Yeah, it does.
There's another tower. I'm not really a particularly big fan of Tron with some of the decks that are just running around right now, truthfully. I would never want to play against humans. Got no interest in that. I think this matchup is very difficult for Tron. Tron just does not have enough interaction points. They do have some really good cards like O-Stone and Ugin, but, Meddling Mage and Freebooter and Thalia are things.
Right, humans is decks that are building up to one big thing. Humans has a lot of ways to break it up along the way.
Yeah.
It's not a lock, and if you are able to get one of those cards to stick, they're in big trouble, but they have a lot of ways of breaking you up along the way.
Yep.
That was the experience. I mean, that was the that really struck me when we were watching Joe Bernal yesterday play against Crack Clan Ironworks, of the Ironworks player having the draw, having all the pieces and Ironworks plus some stuff to set up, and even a Pyrite Spellbomb to interact along the way, and he just got tripped up too many ways along the way.
Mm-hmm. He drew his ways to interact with interaction and still lost. That's tough. That's tough. It looks like this turn is tough here for Dylan Hand right now. He's got to be concerned, staring at an opponent who has access to 7 mana and actually potentially 10 next turn, depending on which land Jackson Peterson wants to play. And his clock is not particularly fast this game.
Yeah, that's the risk here. Is you need to, even if you can break up their plays or their big payoffs in the short term, you also need to close out the game quickly because Tron has so many redraws. The deck is just full of cycling and cantrips and Ancient Stirring type effects, so you can only hold them off for so long. You need to back this stuff up with a real clock.
Champion of the Parish is here, though it is rather late to the pate. The follow-up looks like it might be Thalia's Lieutenant. It is. There'll be a trigger.
Yeah, in hand here with a Freebooter in hand that he could vial in, but I think he's willing to lose out on the point here to do it in the draw step.
And now it looks like that Freebooter is going to come across for 3. 2 plus an Exalted Trigger. Should bring Peterson down to 17. Pass that turn back. Reluctantly, it appears. We'll see if it'll be a draw step freebooter or not. Looks like Karn was the draw here for Jackson Peterson.
Karn, not one of the premier threats in this matchup.
Pretty bad. Pretty bad. Fine on the play on turn 3. Past that, not ideal. As here is Worm Coil Engine looking to stabilize the battlefield. This will be a Vial at the end step. Phantasmal Image is going to copy something. It looks like it's going to copy Thalia's Lieutenant. I was curious if maybe it was going to copy the card you see on your left, which is Worm Coil Engine. A lot of triggers there. Lieutenant. Now would be a great time for a Reflector Mage.
Well, if he imaged the Lieutenant here, to me that, well, if he's thinking about this Vial, then I'm guessing he does not have Reflector Mage, because it would just be a no-brainer to tick up and effectively end the game.
It could, but it would basically be lights out at that stage. Yeah, if he has Reflector Mage right now, the game would actually just end. So perhaps if he's left them in, you try to get lucky and peel it, and you could even maybe find it off of the redraw. This is a Noble Hierarch, triggers. This is game over. That's game. The game is over now.
That is the game.
Is over.
That's
okay.
the game.
Everybody in the club. Yes. Yeah. It's a really good deck. Reflector Mage is a really good card. You can just count the dice. Don't even count the power of the creature. just count the dice. Count the counters on the dice. That is it. Dylan Hand going to win this game and match her over Jackson Peterson. 2-0. Humans going to take care of Mono Green Tron. And for Dylan Hand, top of the standings, top 8 last week. Probably going to top 8 this week. 10-0.